It's been about 4 months since Reservation Dogs has been streaming on Fox/Hulu. Since then, it's won 3 awards and nominated for 6 more. I watched the series a second time, and this time I have more thoughts and perspectives since my initial reaction back in September. So let's get into it. Roll the intro. So, in Res Dogs, it's the pilot directed by Sterlin Harjo, and it's a good pilot. It did a fairly good job of introducing the characters, the setting, and the tone. Off the bat, the dynamic these kids have with each other is actually quite natural, and I enjoyed watching them play off of each other. There were some cameos I didn't recognize and didn't mention in my initial reaction. Macon Blair as like the cashier guy. Then you had Kirk Fox, and honestly, I didn't really know much about Kirk Fox before watching this. Watched his comedy and everything, and now I understand why he was cast as who he was cast as. And obviously Little Mike and Funny Bone, 2 real-life native rappers, and I remember seeing them way back in the day on America's Got Talent. Really talented dudes, and I really love how their characters pop up every now and then, and it actually helps with the narrative. They're not just these random cameos. But in this episode, Kirk Fox's character was actually the funniest to me because I actually know a lot of people like that. They kind of tend to coat their speech in these generic native sentiments, and I don't know, it's kind of weird, but the way he played that character was really funny.
What is it? Be free with your words.
Oh, there.
Yeah, that's right.
And obviously, this is the episode where we're introduced to
William Knifeman,
who is now, in my opinion, probably the newest iconic character in the native media canon. Overall, this was a great pilot episode. We got a great introduction to our protagonists, the 4 kids, and what they're all about and why they're doing a bit of what they're doing. This had Taika Watiti's kind of touch in there, especially in the writing. So Indian Clinic is actually my second favorite episode. This one is directed by Sydney Freeland, and she's been very busy in the industry lately. I think she's directed a Walking Dead episode and a Grey's Anatomy episode, and is really involved in native media directing and writing. And it was good, and it seems that Sterlin Harjo has a relationship with IHS clinics. He directed a short film called Goodnight Irene way back in the day, and it's about an old woman at the IHS hospital waiting room, and Casey Camp Hornick plays the old woman both in Sterlin's short film and in this episode. Fun fact, she's also going to be Gran in the new Avatar series on Netflix, which is actually pretty exciting. And the one exchange that I just thought was hilarious was between Jenna Schmidding and Alora. Jenna Schmidding's character, the IHS receptionist.
Hey, we're selling meat pies outside if y'all want any.
Yeah? Hey, y'all, this girl with stomach pains is selling meat pies. Y'all want any?
Was just Jenna's comedic timing is just genius. And she is just like a lot of IHS receptionists. I think in my opinion they're kind of making fun of IHS receptionists, but if you're an IHS receptionist, we still love you. And I also really chuckled at Big's comment about organic.
What are you in line for then?
Energy drink. It's natural. It's made out of energy. It's organic.
It's just another kind of inside thing that natives do. We love playing with words, you know, I don't know. It just felt like really native to me the way he said it. And, you know, this episode almost had like an intimate feel to it, you know. There was a lot going on in one location, which is actually really hard to do, and they pulled it off really well in this episode. The next episode I really enjoyed was Uncle Brownie. This one was directed by Black Horse Solo, and I can kind of feel his presence in this one. Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. It was a fun one. Now, in my initial reaction video, I can't believe I didn't mention him, but Gary Farmer. Gary Farmer as Uncle Brownie is just icing on cake, you know? Gary Farmer is a very recognizable native actor. He's been in classes like Smoke Signals, Powwow Highway, Dead Man. He's just one of those actors who just isn't almost anything, really. And he co-hosts a really cool radio talk show called Film Talk Radio. And recently he's been interviewing native creators and filmmakers, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, I can't believe I didn't mention him in my reaction video, but he's one of the better parts of this show. But his character as Uncle Brownie, I feel like is another version of himself. I really enjoyed how in one episode, we saw him have a bit of an arc. He went from an old, mean recluse to being able to face his past and make amends because of his time with these kids. I also loved the blessing with the weed, the weed smoke. That was hilarious. I laughed too hard at that part. Other two random cameos that I completely forgot about in my reaction was Bobby Wilson, who is another heavy hitter from the 1491s, collaborated with Sterlin Harjo along with Dallas Goldtooth way back in the day. He was the weed shopkeeper and I really liked him in that. He's also in Rutherford Falls as well as a casino worker. Another cameo that I thought was really random but really cool was Kimberly Guerrero. She plays Auntie B, the lady who gives Willie Jack the kid's hair, the opposite gang's hair, right? I love how later episodes she just has a proclivity to make phallic looking medallions. It's just really funny. If you don't know her, she's most notable for Seinfeld. She played Winona, and like Gary Farmer, she's another heavy hitter. She's just kind of done everything. She played Wilma Mankiller in The Glorias, and she was in Longmire. She's done a lot of representation in native media. She's another one of those great actresses. Come and Get Your Love is also another favorite of mine. It was directed by Black Horse Low as well. And this one felt like a filler episode for She's in Big, played by Zan McLaren, who's also really good in Hawkeye if you've seen it recently. And I really enjoyed the Dear Lady subplot. Okay, it's here I need to mention something kind of serious. In my initial reaction video, I said something really dumb and ignorant. I thought it was very interesting how she was played by a white woman too, which I thought was really cool. Yeah. When I filmed that video, I had just watched the show and kind of just winged it and spouted my initial reactions. I didn't dive too deep into the cast all that much. When I first watched it, I didn't recognize a lot of actors and comedians, including Kanatio Horn. I honestly had no idea who she was. I had no idea she was Mohawk. I didn't know anything about her activism for the Native community and her representation in media, and honestly, it haunts me that I dismissed her as some white lady. Kanatio, if you're watching, I sincerely apologize. I just let my laziness and biases take over, and honestly, that is a problem. This actually sparks something I want to talk about later regarding the racism/colorism that happens within the Native community and how media representation has definitely played a role in that. As soon as people started telling me who she was, I started watching all of her roles and listened to her podcast with her mom lately. And I can really see how her character of Tanis in Letterkenny really influenced her portrayal as the Dear Lady. I really enjoyed her little talk with Big at the end of her pep talk. And then the other aspect of this episode I really enjoyed was how the Dear Lady, she had a huge impact on Big's life, you know, and I really enjoyed that. And I really, again, like I mentioned in my reaction video, Sterlin Harjo here is introducing a sense of mysticism for Native peoples. And I really enjoyed how it kind of shows it's not just superstition, it's a reality. It's affected Big in such a way that it's affected his profession, you know? And he does it in such a fun and clever way by using, you know, the Firebird car motif. I feel like it's her ride. I really like it. And I didn't mention this in my reaction video but with like Wes Studi, I was on Native Film Talk with Ian and he mentioned something that I didn't really notice before because I was just so happy that Wes Studi was in the episode. But he mentioned that this is one of the first times Wes Studi has gotten to play a character that is so similar to himself. He's always playing this stoic, serious Native man, you know? And this is one of those few times where he's just a funny, kooky dude, you know? And I love the gag of how, you know, some of the things that he said seem really weird, but then it's proven to be right down the road, like with the string theory book. I just thought it was really cool how Wes Studi was just free to play someone just like a normal Native guy, not like, he has to be a Native guy, but he's just a normal guy, right? Also, I didn't recognize Kiowa Gordon the first time around. If you don't know him, he's in the Twilight series in the Wolfpack, and he was Lysol in Blood Quantum. And apparently he's gonna be good old Officer Jim Chi in The Dark Wind, which is a AMC series based off of Tony Hillerman's novels. So California Dreamin', directed by Tazba Chavez, honestly was the strongest for me, both in its writing and direction and its acting. We got to see why exactly Alora wants to go to California, and specifically how Daniel's suicide affected her. Devery Jacobs just really shined in this episode, and I really did feel the impact of the moment she finds Daniel. It was really well directed, and her acting just really sold it. She is very talented. And I like how this episode didn't shy away from the realism that I talked about in my reaction, the realism of suicide. Cheese even mentions it in the very first episode about teen suicides on native reservations.
You've been acting weird again?
Probably depressed. Did you know depression affects 1 in 5 Native Americans?
And obviously, like I mentioned in my reaction, Bill Burr's presence here and his acting provided a great avenue for that tone. And he didn't overstay his welcome in the episode. He had his part to play. And their dynamic at the end I thought was actually really sweet. I really enjoyed that. Overall, I liked the episodic feeling of the show, almost like an episode was dedicated to one of the protagonists. It's a day in a life type narrative. The other episodes were okay, they were good, but they weren't like necessarily my favorite. The hunting episode definitely was an important one, but I felt like it didn't have as much punch as the others did. I liked it because we got to see why Willie Jack makes her final decision in the final episode. That's why I really enjoyed it. What About Your Dad felt like a filler episode. There were certain aspects that just kind of felt random, like Bear's mom hooking up with that weird racist white guy. It might be setting up something later in the second season, but for that episode, it kind of broke the flow of the episode. Greasy Fry Bread, it's both catchy and cheesy all at the same time. I think the only thing that helped in that episode was to see how Alora is feeling more and more disconnected with her friends and their goal. But that was like literally in the last 5 minutes of the episode. I kind of felt we could have had that more trickled out throughout the episodes, but that's just me. And honestly, the final episode just felt kind of forced or awkward. But why is that? So, the characters. The cast of our protagonists, we have Devery Jacobs as Alora, the Pharaoh Wunatai as Bear, Lane Factor as Cheese, and Paulina Alexis as Willie Jack. So for me personally, out of all the protagonists, Alora and Willie Jack had the strongest arcs. I think it's because they actually had flashback moments with Daniel. Bear and Cheese didn't. And I think that really contributed to me feeling a little like what at their decisions at the end. Bear and Cheese, both of them kind of fell flat for me, but that's just me personally. I didn't necessarily care too much about them. I don't know. Cheese is a really funny character. He's a quirky character. I like how he's like this loyal puppy, but also had these serious ambitions. He's like a young native Samuel Tarly. But there just wasn't a lot there for me to care about him. We didn't get to see much of his home life or see his motivations as to like why he wants to leave to California with his friends. So that was that. And then Bear, I just felt he was such a dense character. I had a hard time liking him. I was just frustrated with just how thick-headed he is. Like, come on, man, get it together. I mean, even Spirit tells him, or Willow Knife Man at the end of the last episode tells him, you're a dumbass. And I was frustrated with that, but obviously, I'm curious to see what they do with him in the second season. And I actually agree with what Alora tells Bear at the end of the last episode, or like why she's frustrated with him. And I really liked that, but I guess I wish I could have saw that a little harder throughout the show, right? Even though I didn't like Alora's decision at the end of the season, I actually can see why. And it's because we had that episode with her flashbacks with Daniel. And that leaves me to Daniel. I think there's one thing I think would have helped our protagonists a little more was seeing more of their friendship with Daniel. I think if we saw longer flashbacks in the first and second episode, I feel like it would have hit a little stronger. I feel like Daniel is this glue for the characters' motivations. And I felt like, introducing Daniel maybe a little sooner or hanging out with all of them together more at the beginning of the season, I think I would have felt a little bit more at the end of the season, right? But, I'm being too critical.
And yeah, I mean, overall, it's got some funky writing issues and motivations are kind of vague, but just because something isn't perfect doesn't mean it isn't important.
Because I think I'm asking too much of this show because I'm looking at the text or the actual content of the show. However, it's the context that sets the show apart. As an aspiring native creator myself, I'm uber passionate about the representation of indigenous people and stories in media, hence this channel. And this show is probably one of the most important moments for North American indigenous representation since Smoke Signals. Because for once, we have an all-native cast, mostly native crew, all native writers and directors on a major streaming platform for the world to see. Going back to my analysis and my initial reaction, I wanted to expound more on what I said about the show reaching into the realms of realism. Mixing that realism with the navigation of humor is the best way, for indigenous people at least, to strive for some sort of authenticity. In many cases, I felt like I was watching moments from my childhood and my youth. I related to a lot of the humor and even serious moments of this series. Only in a series like this was Wes Studi allowed to be funny and not the typecast he's usually casted in. Only in this series do you get to get a character like William Knifeman, where he's an irreverent and funny subversion of the usual spirit guide trope. Only in this series do we see people blessing themselves with weed smoke or seeing pixelated owl eyes. You get moments like this.
I have to tell you something.
Okay.
I'm not your grandson.
Sure you are. Even if you're not.
There are hundreds of little moments in this show that are a reflection of the current indigenous experience. But by having indigenous creators show what our experience is like, it shows a few things to the world. One, that we are still here and that our cultures are alive and being revived. We are also normal, everyday ass people. We like hot Cheetos and Godzilla. At least I do. We love to laugh. We don't always have to be stoic and spiritual all the damn time. And one, ultimately, that we're human. Overall, I really enjoyed this series, and I'm super excited to see what happens in season 2. I actually like how this show is focusing on the intimate issues of these kids. It's not a sprawling epic where there are big stakes. It's what I would call a domestic dramedy. 4 out of 5 stars for me. And that's it. Thanks again for hanging on with this one. I just had a lot to say. I thought I'd switch up my format just a little bit. I want to play around with how I do things here on YouTube and whatnot. I have a few more things in the works. I want to talk about Rutherford Falls because again, like I mentioned in my Antlers review, I actually really liked Rutherford Falls just a tad bit more than I did with Reservation Dogs. I'll have to talk about it. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was Star Wars. What about Star Wars? Well, you'll have to subscribe and stay tuned. Again, follow on Instagram. I usually post updates of random things about Native representation on my stories. I need to do better at my Instagram posts, but I'm trying to build something here. I want to start having more conversations with all of y'all, get your feedback, your input, things that I may not know about. So thanks for watching, guys, and share it with your friends or whatever. See you later.